Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, today we're exploring a tradition that completely blurs the line between the divine and the human. It is honestly one of the most astonishing cultural practices happening right now in our modern age, the Living Goddess Kumari. Just take a second and really think about this. What actually happens when a nation selects a toddler, literally a 3-year-old girl, to be their living, breathing goddess? I mean, we're so used to worshiping statues or unseen deities, right? But what if the entity you're bowing down to is a young child? A child who needs to be fed, carried, and cared for. It's just an unbelievable reality, and today we're going to unpack exactly how and why this whole thing happens. Here's how we're going to break this down today. First, Nepal's cultural landscape. Second, myths of origin. Third, selecting a goddess. Fourth, life on the pedestal. Fifth, the mortal fall. And finally, tradition versus human rights. All right, diving right into Section 1, Nepal's cultural landscape, a land of temples and traditions. To really get this, we've got to set the scene. Wedged right between India and China, Nepal is just a multicultural marvel. Within its population of roughly 3.72 million people, you've got 125 distinct ethnic groups speaking 123 different languages. It's this incredible land where multiple major religions just coexist peacefully. But the most staggering detail? That's Kathmandu itself. The capital city alone boasts over 3,000 temples. In fact, there's a famous local saying that in Kathmandu, you'll literally see more temples than houses. And it's exactly this deep, pervasive devotion that serves as the perfect incubator for the tradition we're talking about today. So what exactly is a Kumari? Well, Kumari is a Sanskrit word meaning virgin, but in Nepal, a Kumari is not some stone idol or a painting on a wall. She is a living, breathing human child. From a really young age, she's worshipped as the direct physical reincarnation of the goddess Daleju, which is a form of the Hindu goddess Durga, and devotees truly believe that she actively protects the country of Nepal and brings prosperity to all its people. Moving on to Section 2, Myths of Origin, the Kings and the Goddess. Like any truly great tradition, this whole thing begins with folklore. Specifically, it starts with the secret game of dice known as tripasa. So in both of the really popular origin myths, a king is playing this nightly game with the goddess Taleju, who has taken on human form. Now, in the first myth, King Jaya Prakashmala is playing with the goddess, but she gives him one very strict rule. No one can know about this. Well, the king's wife grows incredibly suspicious about where he's sneaking off to every night, so she secretly follows him, bursts open the door, and catches them red-handed. Furious that her rule was broken, the goddess just vanishes. In the second myth, it's King Trilokmala playing the game. But during their match, he makes a massive mistake. He makes an inappropriate advance and actually tries to touch the goddess. Deeply insulted, she disappears. In both legends, the kings beg and plead for her forgiveness. Eventually, goddess Taleju agrees to return, but on one major condition. She will only manifest in the body of a young girl from the Newari community. And boom, just like that, the tradition of the Kumari was born. Which brings us to Section 3, Selecting a Goddess, the Intense Trials. You guys, the selection process here is absolutely wild. Supervised by 5 senior priests, the search focuses on young girls, we're talking usually just 3 to 5 years old, from Buddhist Newari families. First up, there's a super strict physical check. No blemishes, no diseases, pure black hair and eyes, and she has to have exactly 20 baby teeth. Then comes the search for the 32 traits of perfection, and these are incredibly specific. The girl must have the eyelashes of a cow, the thighs of a deer, and a chest like a lion. If she passes all that, her horoscope has to perfectly match the king's. But Step 4 is where it gets truly intense. It's called the fear test. On the night of Dashen, which is a festival where 108 buffaloes and goats are sacrificed, this tiny toddler has to walk through a pitch-dark courtyard filled with these 108 severed animal heads without showing a single ounce of fear. None. And if she somehow survives that, she has to spend the night in a room with the heads. Finally, to seal the deal, she has to correctly pick out the personal belongings of the previous Kumari from a massive pile of items. If she does all of this, she becomes the goddess. Let's look at Section 4, Life on the Pedestal, the Divine Isolation. So what happens once she's chosen? For the royal Kumari of Kathmandu, she has to leave her family entirely and move into the Kumari Gar, which is a special palace where caretakers literally attend to her every single need. She's only allowed to wear red clothes, and to maintain absolute purity, her feet must never ever touch the ground. She is carried everywhere she goes. Even her own parents have to treat her like a deity. They call Telugu, they offer her food first, and sometimes they even quit their jobs just to serve her full time. But what's truly fascinating, and a bit intense, is how this scrutiny goes all the way down to her facial expressions. When devotees visit, every single twitch of her face is analyzed. If she remains serious, awesome, the devotee's wishes will be fulfilled. If she cries, trouble is coming. But amazingly and terrifyingly, if this little girl smiles, it is interpreted as an omen of impending death. No joke. Because of this, she has to learn to keep a completely stoic face at all times. That takes us to Section 5. The mortal fall. The illusion breaks. Now, this divine status, it doesn't last forever, and the shift is massive, and it is abrupt. The very moment the Kumari sheds blood, whether that's the natural onset of puberty or literally just a simple scrape on the knee that bleeds, the illusion is broken. The belief dictates that the goddess Telugu has officially left her body. In an instant, she is dethroned, and the intense search for a new toddler begins all over again. She goes from being this revered, all-powerful deity whose feet never touch the ground, straight back to being a normal mortal teenager. And the aftermath, it's incredibly difficult. I mean, imagine being treated as a flawless princess for 8 to 10 years, completely isolated from normal society, and then suddenly dropped into the real world. These young women face a really harsh return to reality. Because they've been carried everywhere, many of them literally have to learn how to walk properly on their own. They often suffer from severe social anxiety, they fear crowded places, and they struggle to even speak loudly to other people. Historically, because the public believed a goddess knows everything, they weren't given an education. That leads to massive struggles in finding jobs later on, leaving them reliant on a really small, often completely insufficient government pension. And to make matters worse, there's this heartbreaking superstition out there that any man who marries an ex-Kumari will die early, which attaches a really painful stigma to her future personal life. Finally, Section 6, Tradition versus Human Rights, a Modern Reckoning. So we're looking at a real clash here. We have to balance the profound religious reverence of the devotees with the very real practical concerns raised by human rights activists. Back in the past, it was total isolation and absolutely zero education. But recently, due to modern outcries regarding child welfare, the Nepali government has actually instituted some reforms. Today, Kumaris are permitted to study, they have private tutors, and they can even play with a small circle of friends. However, for the royal Kumari in Kathmandu, the isolation remains pretty severe. She still lives away from her family and is only allowed to leave her palace maybe 12 to 13 times a year for very specific festivals. As we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Can ancient traditions survive if they require the sacrifice of a normal childhood? It's a deeply complex line, right, between preserving a country's beautiful, multi-layered cultural heritage and ensuring the psychological well-being of a young girl. The Living Goddess of Nepal is an absolute marvel of human belief, but it certainly asks us to weigh the cost of the divine against the needs of the mortal. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this topic. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.